Hello, hello. So, finally we are starting. It is the first time that I do this kind of stream or kind of work, so bear with me. Well, this stream is gonna be about publishing, specifically publishing video games. Let's talk about intellectual property, which is at the base of our business. What is the intellectual property? It is tricky in the sense that video games are very new to the scene of creative arts or arts, and it's heavily based on technology. So we don't have an international regulation. Not everybody feels or understands intellectual property the same. Two main differences would be European perception of intellectual property versus American or case law, right? In Europe, we have a very high consideration for the natural creator, author, where American or case law don't. In America or in the States or case law, intellectual property is protected or covered mostly by copyright. So it's very mercantilized, and the natural rights, or what we call moral rights or droit d'auteur, are something very foreign. Why? Because in Europe or in European law, moral rights are not to be traded with, and Americans or case law don't really concept that or factor that in. I don't want to go too deep into this to make it so very boring that nobody follows me on this. The point of this is that there is different conceptions about what is being an author in Europe and in America. Some artists ask, is the French working droit d'auteur popular across Europe? Didn't know that. Yes. Well, the whole European, it's a whole system. So this is how each country in the European Union will have a slight take, but we are all mostly conformed by the same code. Well, I'm making it maybe too complicated right now, but anyway. So yeah, we do have the moral rights, and I would say almost all European countries would have moral rights versus the copyright protection. Not that we don't have them. We do have also copyrights, but it's a bit different. It's not just the copyright. Okay. At the base is the IP. And when we create video games, we're creating IP. We're creating intellectual property, right? Because a video game it's not something tangible, especially now that we have digital distribution and there's nothing really physical to stick the game on, right? We do still have cartridges and discs and all that, but it's not necessary for a video game to be stick on a cartridge or the disc to exist. And here in Europe, under the droit d'auteur or moral rights, you are author just by creating something. It's a right that it just happens when one fixes that idea, that concept, that whatever you have in your mind or in a group of people, and you fix it into something. This right, it doesn't need to be registered anywhere. As soon as you publish your game, you're the author, you're the owner of the game, right? Okay, we know, because we're talking about publishing, that there might be several people involved in this, and that's okay. We might have the developer, we might have the publisher, and this is two different people, but there's going to be an agreement between the parties establishing that, okay, I'm the author, Here, the developer would be the author, and then the publisher is the company that makes that property public, right? That gives that distributes that IP. Okay, it's just that, trying to find that fine line between what is too technical and what can be like commonly talked is a bit complicated. It's a bit tricky. So I'm trying not to go too far off and too far removed from the whole point, which is basically stating that video games are art, it's art and technology, and there's no harmonized regulation on how to protect this artwork. Like there is a specific regulation for literary works, even for cinema. I mean, the legal protection for cinema is way more detailed, and it goes way more deeper and clear than it goes for video games. And that is worldwide. I mean, of course, then there's this specificities to every country, and even in a country like the United States, there's different stuff that could affect. But video games, we're still too young. There's a lot of great lawyers working internationally to harmonize the protection. The OMPI, the WIPO actually in English. So it's the World International, it's the organization, the worldwide organization that takes on the intellectual property, is working on precisely that, and to give rules and how to protect everything. So maybe, I'm gonna do a stream in a bit more depth and clarity regarding IP and the parts, and because I get fairly often questions regarding how to protect a video game, especially young developers. They wonder a lot. So do I have to deposit my code somewhere to do an escrow so nobody will copy me, or do I need to register my name? Well, not my name, the game's name, or even, I don't know, the characters and the design of the characters and the artwork and all that stuff, right? And of course one can go that route, but at the end of the day, it depends what your budget is and what your expectations on really reaching out are. Because what would be the point on registering your game in, I don't know, in Peru, for example, just on the top of my head, if you're not gonna really be able to defend or to do anything, especially and precisely because you already have your rights as an author of your game and ideas are not protected. I don't even think that it's feasible to protect an idea in the United States. It is not. It is a bit more murky regarding patents because in Europe it's not possible to patent a video game. One can try to patent certain stuff, maybe connected to it, but not a video game, because a video game is considered art. So it goes under the moral rights, so the droit d'auteur. So anyway, I'm gonna make a stream more specifically regarding that. Something that is very interesting is and gives a good understanding of how this industry works. It's the chain of valor, what we call who the people is that works in the company, in the industry, right? And we have basically two main chains. We have a physical chain that actually was the only chain up until the years 2000, and then one after that. So before digital distribution was a thing, what we had is the developer, who was the one making the game. Then we had a producer. Normally it could be in the video game developer or outside, a third-party company that was producing the project and made sure that the game was done. Then we had the publisher, who was the one who basically paid the game. And then we had the platform owner, who was also the one that duplicated the game. So this is very interesting, because platform owners, I mean, being a platform owner gives you a lot of power, because you decide who gets in, and you always get a piece of the cake no matter what anybody does. Especially now talking prior 2000, right? So then there was the distributor, who was the company that took those copies and sent it to all the retailers, and then the retailers, the stores, and then the market, so people that bought it, right? This was basically the people involved. So the chain between the developer and the player was very far removed. And it was characteristic, this period, for how few people, and people here includes also companies, how few people had the key to access the market. And here market, we can also consider the stores. Getting to the stores, it was complicated, right? Platform owners wouldn't work with anybody. It was very difficult to become a publisher. You couldn't decide, oh, I think I know the business. Oh, let's jump into it. Let's duplicate some copies and some games, do some copies, and then we'll sell it into a store. It wasn't like that at all. It was really tricky. I mean, I always think about this chain. I think about the 80s, the 90s. But you have to think that the main markets for video games production, it would be Japan and the United States, each one dominating each decade, right? And Europe was a bit in the middle. And I don't think we've ever had a platform. I mean, I can think about one platform that was only done, produced, and distributed in Europe that had any impact, because our friend here, Moigut, mentioned it, which was the Spectrum. And it's where the video games in Spain had like some sort of golden era. Some say, I'm not one of those, but I don't think in Europe we've had never our own platform. We were the youngest brother. You mean the Europeans? We were the youngest brother, getting everything late and not even everything. Yeah, absolutely. So we basically, in Europe, we had a lot of developers, and we had producers and publishers. I mean, countries that saw the potential really supported the industry in those countries, like France, UK, and Germany. They really had golden eras there. But we've never had our own platform. Like one could say that. My point is that the Americans have had several consoles, Japan also. We in Europe, we have never had. So, yeah, tricky. We've had other stuff, right? But then, I know that it started in the 90s, don't go crazy about it, but when digital distribution really kicked it off, my good is saying that Pure Studio was a great dev back in the day, and of course they were. I mean, they were amazing, but that's the 90s, and it wasn't in the Spectrum, which is where the golden era was. Anyway, that was a side comment. But of course, Pure Studio put out Commandos, and that's like a flash in the dark of the night, right? I think now we're seeing a lot more shooting stars in the development scene of Spain. Anyway, working with platform owners was very complicated. working with, so basically only publishers got access really to the market because they were the only ones allowed to duplicate copies. Of course, smaller consoles or smaller systems maybe have had local markets, but that's not seen from a globalized point of view, right? So as a developer, I haven't said it, but I mean, I come, well, and when I mean Abylight. Abylight comes from being a developer that also was coming from partners, founders that were developers in another company here in Spain. And so we as publishers in Abylight, we're very mindful of the development side and the developer point of view, and we're very invested also as developers, or giving a high attention to the development side, right? As I've said in the past or recently or whatever, whenever you have hear me, we are not a publisher on volume. We don't care for volume. We care for quality. We are really focused on, and even if it's a small creation, a video game creation, but that it's really good. And for us, really good is that it's well made, that has a technical side to it that is excellent, and also that the gameplay, the enjoyment is good. Our dark days are past. Anyway, if you were a developer back in the day, pre-2000s, you only had two options, really. The first option was that you were engaged by a publisher or a producing company to develop and create games for whatever they wanted. And here is what happened. Because the publisher were the ones in touch with the market, and the publisher was the one paying the whole game, they tended to have a great say on what the developer actually did. So you mean that back in the day, publishers would like do some sort of ask for, okay, I'm looking for someone to do this kind of game, and then, or even the other way around, the developer would say, hey, I'm looking to do this kind of game, and they would get together and agree on that. Yeah, back in the day that was more common, especially if you were established developer, that they would send their yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course. I mean, this happens nowadays too. Not exactly like this, but because, well, there's been a shift that we will get to eventually in this stream, but that still happens where there's several, because the resources are limited, right? There's no unending amount of money put in to do a video game, because not everybody is going to spend 50 million, and something happens with video games that no matter how much money you put into it, it's gonna be even bigger than its budget. So it always happened the same. No matter the size of the budget, the game is gonna be bigger than its budget, and it's gonna overflow it. Always is like that. Why? It's simple. It's art. And art cannot be restricted. I mean, if I have 10, I can go up to here. But if I would have 11, I could go just a bit better more. And that's what tends to happen with the artistic part of video games. Well, in this era, there was basically two options. You either were a developer that did their own IP, which there were very few of. Very few. Like, really a few. Like, you could count them with both hands. Or you were an engaged, a work for hire, even though work for hire meant something different. But basically, those were the two options. And mainly, at least that's the part that I knew more, was the work for hire side. The developer that really wanted to develop video games had to do work for hire, because it was very, very difficult to do your own creation. However it happened, right? You, as a developer, you had, if you had success doing work for hire, then you could pitch which is basically what Martis was talking about, which is, hey, as a developer, instead of waiting for a publisher to come and tell me, hey, I wanted this, let's do a pitch, prepare, and present some publishers that we know our idea and what do they think about. If you were lucky, you were picked up and they would pay you or help you pay the production of the video game. What happens after 2000, the years 2000, when digital distribution arrives? That completely switches off the game. And we at Abylight lived it really, really, really harshly. Actually, this double-side pitching where you go and present an idea versus someone presenting you an idea, I'm gonna say that it's fairly happened always. However, is how often and how those deals were signed, right? I mean, you had to be very heavy important developer to had your idea be picked up by a publisher back then. Obviously, for obvious reasons, because also the publishers back then were more in tune with what was happening in the market. So what developers wanted to play that at than developers, because they were that was their job. Their job was to know the market versus developers were their job was to create games. Post 2000s, that changes. Internet grows really strong. We are not depending on a modem connection. We already have like not cable, but like steady internet connection. We can buy things from the internet. Consoles, the new consoles that appear, start getting their online stores. The old generation of consoles die out. Mobile starts to kick in. It's true that the mobile is not smart, so games are still very similar and clunky to what we had on portable consoles at the beginning of the 2000s. But the whole important point is that digital distribution starts to appear. What happens then is that gives the impression that developers can jump ahead. And instead of involving so many people, they practically can go direct to market. And that's kind of true. As a developer now, the platform owner is not so picky and tricky, although at the beginning they are, mind you. Not everybody can go into the digital stores of consoles and, publish like they can do now. That now is completely different. Yeah, the WiiWare was one of the services. That was the service for Nintendo. And at the beginning was really one thought. I mean, the Wii was I think still is the most sold console in the world over the whole time. And so when the WiiWare was announced, as a developer, and you as a developer got access to it, you were like, oh my God, you were using the numbers of the publishing prior times and thinking, oh my God, there's like 100 million consoles in the market, and then this percent, you were making one of those lines of percentage. At the end of it, you always were making money on the WiiWare, for example. And sadly, it was not so, because the Wii was mainly sold to people that never play games. So even though it was a console that sold a lot, and I think it still is the console to hold the mark of most sold console in the world in time, but very few people got it connected to the internet, and less people still bought games on the service. And it was so complicated. The WiiWare was really, really almost killed Abylight twice. So just saying. Other services work better and more efficiently, but still. The point is that we have now, and also let's not forget the platform that was condemned to die, which was PC. It was announced its death because who would buy a PC game? And it's true. PC as a box product died completely. We moved from everywhere had a CD-ROM to nothing. But hello, Valve, Steam, and that's digital distribution. They saw it coming and kind of forced everyone to there, and it worked. It worked, and it saved the industry for PC. This is what happens when we have a platform that is very easy to access it. Chances are that the struggle is not going to be into creating and developing and putting out something. The struggle is going to be to make it work in the sense of the market. How are you going to be known? To publish in PC is super easy. You can actually publish in your own website a PC game and you're already published, right? However, who is going to find your game in your website? That's the tricky part. Mobile, there's a funny evolution that it's opposite between App Store and Steam. We start on very restricted to really not restricted and how it floods the store versus the opposite direction. Apple started with no rails, no rules, no filters, great big store, and now gradually putting bars or restrictions to the store and how to get into it, right? It is way cheaper. The thing is that what it really effectively changed is the market side of things. And because prior you needed to duplicate, you needed to have hard copies, there was a handling and a stock and a management of stock. I mean, everybody knows, I think, if you're listening to me, probably you already know the famous ET desert pile of copies that got covered in the sun in the desert, right? That's what happens in the physical world, in the traditional chain of value, the ET disaster, right? That factually that disaster destroyed the video game industry in the States in the 80s. So, but then Japanese came in, right? Well, anyway, with distribution, it gives the impression that you don't need anybody. I'm not saying that anybody could publish their games. I'm saying that video game developers could more easily publish without involving so many people. You could, with your experience working in the industry and your savings and your nights and you're missing your family and you're missing parties and a lot of stuff, you could put all your effort into a video game and publish it yourself into a digital store that would make you a famous artist or something like that, right? A video game developer. That had some truth to it, and it worked for certain people, but it's not true at all. Yes, it is. It is like that, but it's, as we say, it's not gold in everything that shines, right? Or something like that. Because if you're a developer, you're still going to be good at creating games. And there's a special skill set that one needs to publish a game. Because when you're publishing, you're selling. Basically, you're selling. And when you're developing, you're creating. Creating and selling is not the same. And sometimes I will have to say, hey, this and this and that of your creation, which is fantastic, but that's not what is going to make it sell. What is going to make it sell is if I fix on this thing that it's gonna connect with the public, for example. This is just examples, right? Just to say that selling, it's its own craft. In publishing, it involves a lot of different areas. We always thought that publishers were important, and we've worked with many publishers. We actually currently are working with a publisher but it's more like a traditional, like pre-2000s, where we are developers of a video game and they are the publishers. Of course, it's very neat to have all the knowledge from a publisher, or all the knowledge that we have as publishers, to work on the promotion and to work on making this game a success, which is Prison Tycoon under new management. Just so you know, heads up. Today it was announced the early access coming up on summer 2021. But at any rate, my point there, we're doing the role of developer, however with a spin. So it's kind of established because we have a publisher who is the owner of the IP and who is the one, taking care of the publishing of the game. But we as developers are not following, their direction in terms of creativity. We're left with a space to create and to be like new developers, like new age developers, where there's an indie creative side to us and we are able to put ourselves into the project. That idea that a developer can go direct to market is even if it's true as a fact, it's not necessarily the right road to take, because as I said, selling is a craft on its own, and if you want to be efficient, you want to go with the hand of people that knows more than you or know better than you, so your game sells well. Because when you're living off of your craft, of your art, you need people to buy it, because that's how we developers or publishers get our money, right? Of course, there's all those people that are putting money now, like those funds and all that investors, that it works a bit different. They are more into the business of investment and blah. But developers, publishers from the industry, in the industry, what we want is create, build, and grow, and each one has its own craft. It's like, okay, I'm an excellent programmer, I'm a okay artist, I'm a crappy designer, so I'm gonna do everything myself because I can do it. Well, that's not the point. Maybe if you get a designer that is excellent and an artist that is excellent and I am an excellent programmer, then we will do an excellent game, right? So that's the thinking. Not to mention that there is a lot. I already said that there's a lot to take into account. Like we have marketing, we have knowing the market, we have relationships with all the people that makes the industry, right? We have the funding, the monetization, the analysis, the legal stuff. It's a lot. Do you recommend separate the focus in the social media accounts of the game and the studio? So I'm laughing because it connects with what I've done. Because Abylight has lived for so long and has done so many things, we've actually done everything, or almost. I'm not trying to be pretentious, but I'm just saying we've learned by failing, because there were no schools where we could learn. I mean, the people on the studio, the young recruits, they definitely come with fancy degrees and they know a lot from the get-go because they learn it in school. So we've done social profiles for games, and we've done just the promotion on Abylight's profiles. It doesn't work. I mean, if your strong suit is being a social media mogul, then go ahead, do as many as you want. But if your focus is video game creation, you have to choose your battles. I have my personal account, and then I have my company's account. And because I'm a company that's here to stay, I already have a lot of games on my track. And if every game has its own account, it's going to be crazy to manage. Mind you, I'm not Electronic Arts, I'm not Activision, I'm not King, I'm not, I don't know, I don't have a team of 100 people managing my accounts. I myself, I have Orchid, that you can see her Mondays and Thursday playing games to show you what we've done, what we're doing, and what other games might be interesting to see, to check them out. We also have Alejandro at this moment, but we're a small team. So I recommend to focus the activity on what you're best. Whenever you can externalize either in someone else in your team that dedicates themselves to that, or be efficient. Probably you don't need to create a social media, especially for the game. Then again, it depends on the game. Because I remember back when we started publishing RC Club, we thought, well, this game is a free to play. It was my like nth time trying to do free to play mobile, right? But it was like the first real juicy free to play game for Abylight. It was awesome. It is awesome, actually. I'm really proud of it, but it's not making what it should. Again, I love the project to death. That sometimes happen, but it's not moving that amount of people that makes sense to dedicate someone to manage its own communication, right? We set up a Twitter handler, and it didn't make much sense, so I don't recommend it. I think, especially if you're not like super big. I mean, it would make sense if you're big and you're Electronic Arts and you have like, or Ubisoft, and you have all these super cool IPs that millions of people follow, then yeah, absolutely do it. But if you're like an Abylight size company, I think Orchid can handle talking about different games efficiently. So no, I would not recommend it. This also talks to one of the changes that has happened in the industry, and that's what the indie scene changed. Before, I would go to events and pitch our ideas to see whether they click, or offer our services as a full game developer, never missing a milestone, blah 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 blah. But then there was a time that the publishers didn't want to hear about that. They wanted to hear what could we do, and how much did we know about the market. And it's like, well, hold a minute, hold a second, hold on. Aren't you supposed to know about the market? And I can do anything, right? It was a bit frustrating. And whenever we came with ideas, they were, the moment that we went to pitch them, it was already old news, because the market, I mean, they could think ahead, but I was always arriving late for that. It took us a while to catch on. Let's put it that way. But that's what the indie scene did. The indie scene did that. Suddenly, even if you didn't have money, it didn't matter. What mattered was what you had to say in terms of video game creation. So your ideas, your input, your vision. It's like you've been swimming all your life like this, and suddenly it's like, okay, now go swim, and you're like. That's kind of what happened to us. It took us a minute to catch on and catch up and survive, because that's on our DNA, to survive. And that's a dramatic change, because I guess without that, maybe we wouldn't be in this point where we have like a structure pre-2000 with Ziggurat Interactive, but with the freedom and creative freedom that post 2000 brought us. And When I teached at the university, I had this slide where I put a picture. It was several years ago, but I put a picture of Van Gogh saying today and said indie developer, because that was mainly what happened. There was almost nothing else. 5 years ago, it felt like publishers disappeared. I mean, 5 to 10 years ago, felt like there were no more publishers besides the really big ones. But at any point, an indie developer, because this digital distribution is making that anybody can create and anybody can put out the content and anybody was going to be rich, right? I was talking to someone the other day, and every time that I did a plan for to Alberto from Cosmic Works. Every time I did a plan for a free to play game, everybody ended up a millionaire, right? It was never like that for indie developers, really. Maybe in the States it was a bit more like that. I mean, France, they had it good. They've had it really good. I mean, once they lost Infogrames, we all lost a lot, because now the big names, I mean, correct me, Martist, because I don't know everything, but now the big French names are developers that auto publish basically, and Infogrames was a publisher that was everywhere. Yeah, of course. I mean, the previous company where we came from, where Abylight came from, it was a developer that worked for Infogrames. I mean, we did so many Game Boy games. It was like a certain road to complete ruin for indies. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you cannot minimize the work that it takes to publish a game, even if you can technically do it. So the point about the indie scene is that it was professionals with experience in the industry, so they knew how to do video games. They had ideas about doing video games. They maybe didn't know so much about selling video games, but they were creatives that had savings, and they were professionals and wanted to do their own thing, and they couldn't do it in their companies because the companies, once you grow a certain level, you're tied to your responsibilities, and your freedom gets shrink. That's what happens. If you want to be free, you have to be responsible. If you're responsible, you have to make compromises. If you make compromises, you're not so free anymore. That's how indie movement started, with professionals. And then it got blown out of proportion. Well, maybe not out of proportion, but it blew up. It blew up stratospherically because certain things happened. What happened was, yes, this digital distribution made technically possible to access directly the market. As more the time advanced, the easier it became, because it was not so easy with the Wii, for example, versus how easy it is with the Switch, for example. But also the middleware tools. Before, we had to create our own engine to publish into certain platforms. Actually, Abylight was always very strong on Nintendo platforms because we were developing for Nintendo platforms since the 90s, right? For us, Nintendo legalese, structure, silence, way of relate, it was like, sure, it was very, very common for us. So it was very easy to go back to that instead of exploring other platforms that were more profitable, but and easier to handle, but they were foreign for us. I'm talking about years ago, like 2010, around the 2010, where we did a lot of WiiWare, DSware, well, DSiWare, and 3DS, eShop, and yeah, we've done a lot of that stuff because it was the common thing. Anyway, for us, right? And we had to create our own engine. And we were very comfortable with that. Abylight was always very, very strong technically. Funny comment, funny note. We've always been very, very strong technically, but all our awards have been for design. And okay, I'm laughing alone, but it's funny because when people have talked to me in the past, in I'm talking like 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago. Not now. Now Abylight is a lot more stuff than just technical. But yeah, it was funny because oh yeah, but you're just technical. You're just technical. Then boom, award for design. Anyway, the point being that you needed to have a certain knowledge on the technical side, how to create, how to develop your engine. So the programmers were even more important than they are now. They've always been important. Everybody's important. Let's say it like this. Everybody's important, but there were a time where you couldn't do a game without a programmer. Where now you can, because the tools got so simplified, so complete, so ready out of the box that you don't need that much technical knowledge to put out a game. The difficulty has shifted on that regard. With certain middleware tools, that has made also possible the people that were creative and wanted to do video games were able to do video games. That has a really positive side to the industry that it's no small feat, and it's very important. And I hope not to lose the whole point here, the whole train of thought. The whole train of thought is because of the indie movement and this ability of many voices being able to create video games, we have an industry now that is scattering to a lot of different tastes. Where before we have the indie movement, the industry was scattering only to the biggest piece of the cake that was monetizing or was easier to monetize, which was male between 20 and 35, although those ages are changing. But thanks to the indie scene, we have this enormous catalog of genres, of games, of topics, of characters, of gameplays, of things. It's amazing, and I honestly don't know where it's gonna go. My common thought is that after this big splash, it's gonna again tailor into specifics, because that's also what's happening with music. Sorry, but we'll see. We'll see, because yeah, games have something that is more interactive than music. Music, unless you're one of the players of the song, you're basically in a video game. You have to actually do something if you want to experience the game. Where in music, you're more like passive. You can dance, but you don't have to, and you could still enjoy music. Why is this important? It is very important, especially for me personally, because during what I want to call the dark ages, no, it's not, but during this pre-model, where just the publishers or distributors or the people that with the money and the control and access to the market were deciding what kind of games were made, we find that on consoles there were very limited variation of genres and subjects. It was getting very, very, very laser focused on just one kind of player and their tastes and its tastes, right? 90s, dark ages for me, console lost me, because I did not enjoy sports games, shooting games, fighting games. I mean, they are okay. I like them, but like one or two or three or 10, but 100, no, thank you. I want other stuff. I'm actually a puzzle sequential kind of player, so I like a lot poker. I don't need to bet to enjoy it. I love I love the game for itself. But I got bored. I played a lot. I've always played a lot video games. My father was traveled and brought us games from the States, from the rest of Europe, from Japan even. And I've always played. We've always had a lot of consoles and PC and whatnot. So I've always played. But it got a point that my brother kept playing and I got bored. I didn't even want to go to the arcade anymore because it was all the same games. And that has changed with the indie scene. Now I think that every person has a game. Every person has its own game they can enjoy. That we have really varied genres, tastes, characters, everything. It's very diverse because first it was the indies that they had no money. They had no money. They had their creativity, and there's been a lot of successes around the world around the indie scene, and they've proven that there is a market that we cannot discount. And actually, when we have at the end of the 90s the awful, it was the end, I don't recall exactly when the Wii was launched, but it was a very very aggressive fight between Microsoft and Sony. Sony had already won over Sega and fighting for better technology, better graphics, better. And then here comes Nintendo and says, forget about it. Here's the Wii that has the worst graphics in many, many years. And it's the most sold console in the world. So we cannot discount any part of the market, and that's what was happening in the 90s, where only certain people in the industry were deciding what is going to be produced because it's more effective. We need to make sure that whatever we put out, we sell, right? Basically now anybody can create. However, that doesn't mean that all that it's created gets to a success story. And we can talk about success stories. I mean, what is a success? It's very it's tricky because it's not the same for everybody. Yeah. Well, imagine that you need to eat. That's what when you're a professional happened to us for the longest time. And at the beginning of the indie scene, where this message was beginning to be put out, we were like, yeah, sure, funny, yeah, do whatever. And then what? I do whatever, and then how I pay my bills. It wasn't as simple like 10, 15 years ago to do whatever and it will happen. Especially if you were based in Barcelona, Spain. If you were based in LA, probably it was easier, a lot easier, For us, thankfully, we're mostly doing what we want, but we are not Van Gogh in the sense that we're not crazy. We live of what we do, and what we do is our profession. So our profession has to yield income for us. So it is very important that whatever we do has an expectation of making more money than we put in, because otherwise better go to the casino and gamble it all away, and still we had more time left to do something else. It's important. I think it's important. If you're a professional, it means that you want to live off your craft, and just because you communicate better your craft in terms of video games would be that you have this creativity inside of you that you want to put out as a video game. If you are able to attune it better to the need or a desire in the market or in the audience or in the players, then that is also very important, because doing video games and getting paid for it, it's the best way to continue doing video games in your life, especially if that's what you want to do. Yeah, I mean, you hear all those fantastic indie stories that they were like, this guy it was the Monument Valley guy that spent 5 years doing the game, and still when they put it when Fonil put it out, he wasn't really satisfied and wasn't happy about it. So he was lucky his wife or girlfriend was there but it requires a certain ability to sustain all that, because yeah, he got lucky at the end, but I know a lot of people that have lost everything, and not only them but their family, because they wanted to do a video game and didn't take into account how to sell it into the market. It's not a joke, it's serious stuff, because the bank won't care when they come kicking you out of your house whether you're doing your life will or not. You either can pay or go out, Well, planning and analyzing and executing and, being aware of the whole channel. Again, and this is going to be the motto of this stream, is that just because you can doesn't mean that you have to, or it's good that you do. Just because you can put your game out directly doesn't mean that it's the best option. Because there is a knowledge that goes into selling that if you've never done it, you won't have it. If you're concentrating to doing something else, you're just be wasting your time trying to manage to be able to do something else that you don't want to do in the first place. You're never going to be good at it because you don't want to do it, and you're not doing what you're really good at it, which is creating a game. And always in video games there's going to be exceptions. There is no magic rules, there is no straight rules, there is no rules really. There is a common sense and common tradition, and there is always, and this is very unnerving and tricky, because there is always the chance that someone will do what is said to be impossible to do. So, when given recommendations or talking about the video game industry, is very hard to be strict with certain things. You can give your point of view and you can talk out of your experience, and the more you know, the better you will get to predict certain stuff. But really know something, looking into the future, I don't think anybody has it. Nobody has it. And because video games is a modern art and creation industry, there is always an exception to whatever rule you want to set down. Always. The industry evolves really fast, and what I'm seeing lately is that publishers are back on. testing is super important. I always say it. Testing is super important. Is one of the most important parts of putting out a game as a publisher. But I personally cannot do it. I never could, because I cannot do something that I get annoyed so much, and testing is just messing with the program, and it goes some, I cannot do it. Just I cannot do it. But it's super important, and it actually is going to reflect directly into the craft of the developer. If a game goes out without proper testing, the developer is gonna look really bad, really, really bad. So don't do it. Always test. Always test the game before putting it out. I know at the end is when the developer is most tired of a creation, but it's super important to get that strength to finish correctly the game, because otherwise all the effort put into the game up until that point is lost on that final streak. And I tend to say that that's the difference between an amateur developer and a professional developer. But as said, that's not necessarily true. I know amazing amateur developers, and I know very crappy professional developers. So crappy in the sense that they don't test. That's something that also has changed through digital distribution. Before, in the previous model, the developer had to come out with 0 bugs. 0 bugs. Nothing could affect the program. The game was done when it was done and sent to duplication. And now you actually can you can publish a game that it's not finished, that it's not even fully tested. Like, we're going to be doing with Prison Tycoon on the early access, that it's not going to be fully tested. It's going to be worked with the audience. And that has changed because of digital distribution, because of that direct contact that we have now, developers with the audience, with the players. Oh, okay. So this is interesting. Martis is sharing with us that I'm assuming it's a he, maybe it's a she, but played Art Aesthetics XXL since release and became its first speedrunner. Went on to know the game like of course, if you were a speedrunner, that's for sure. Oh, got it. Oh, that's nice. That's very interesting. They didn't fix all the bugs. I reported there wasn't enough time. Yeah, exactly. That will happen. That will happen. I know for a fact that there's, if you have a very competent test team that is able to really report, they are gonna catch the most important bugs. Those are gonna be fixed. Fixing a bug can take from several hours to days to, we don't know. A bug can be very tricky. But there's a list of priorities. So it goes, the most important bug is the one that's gonna crash or go against the guidelines of the platform. And those are the ones that have to be fixed. And then the list goes to in the descent of importance, and these color jumps, or this pixel, or this image is a bit moved, or so special. It goes on importance of enjoyment. Basically, what you want to ensure is that the player is going to be able to enjoy the game, and as far from that goal the bug is, the less likely that it's going to get fixed, because money, time, efficiency, you have to close the debugging session, the QA, sorry. Porting is it's one of the toughest jobs that there are, that a developer or a now there are porting houses specialized on just that, but it's really tough. It's a work that it's really tough, and if it's done right, very rarely gets recognized. But if it's done wrong, everybody's gonna complain about that. It's like the producer role. If it's done right, nobody's gonna say anything, not even thank you. But if it's done wrong, if everything goes awry, if the production is not working well, then it's a mess. It's a complete mess. Well, the last source code is not that weird or that strange. To talk about that kind of stuff, we could invite our publisher, someone from Ziggurat, because they've bought a lot of old IPs, and they are doing that. They are like updating them and putting them out, and they have to deal with a lot of this stuff that you guys are talking about. The games that they don't have the source code, they only so. Yeah, I mean, this kind of things happen. You have to think that IPs and video games, even though the IP might be something independently from the source code, it's gonna be maybe tough to, if you want to just put out the original, if you don't have the source code, it's gonna be super tough. I'm gonna wrap it up. For next week, we're going to be talking basically on business models and whatever you guys bring to the table or tell me to, that we have the Discord public server, Abylight public server on Discord. So definitely put in whatever you would like to explore in more depth. It's going to be every week, every Tuesday. We're going to be talking about publishing stuff and, depth stuff, I guess. On Mondays and Thursdays, we have Orchid playing games. And on Wednesdays, so tomorrow, we have Miguel Garcia talking about video game development. Okay, guys, thank you very much. And we haven't worked yet about the ending, so I'm just going to disconnect, I guess. Very abruptly.